Hi folks, Rick Wedell here. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at RFG Advisory in Birmingham. Today is Friday, August 14th. And I thought I'd come to you with a brief market update, kind of let you know what's going on out there. As I speak, the S&P 500 is right around 3370 for a level, which is pretty flat. It is amazing to see it up there, given that we are only about 15 points below the high for the S&P 500, which is about 3385. So the market is obviously in a good place on an overall basis. Although I would continue to point out, we talked a little bit about this last week, that there's a wide range of dispersion in terms of winners and losers this year. In fact, one of the widest that we've seen in quite some time. If you look at the growth companies in the S&P 500, those are up about, on average, 16.5% this year. And meanwhile, if you look at the more value-driven, the more industrial companies that are out there, those are down about 11% this year. So that's almost a 28% delta between the sort of growthy, techie names on one hand and the more industrial value names on the other, which is a very large dispersion. And as one of my friends likes to say, being diversified means always having to say you're sorry. So just keep that in mind as you look through your portfolio. You're going to see some winners and losers this year, and we'll be able to take advantage of that come tax time, or your advisor should be able to take advantage of some of that come tax time. You can not only see it in the performance, you can also see it in the earnings of the various indices. As I mentioned last week, the S&P 500's earnings for the second quarter, are down about 10%, which is super fantastic relative to the down 45% that people were fearing. However, if you look at the Russell 2000, which is the 2,000 small mid-cap companies that are out there, these are the smaller companies in the economy, those companies have seen their earnings go from roughly $18 billion in aggregate last year to minus $1 billion this year. So that is just an overall indication of how the virus and the pandemic has impacted smaller companies more than large companies and impacted those value-oriented industries, those more industrial, traditional manufacturing style companies more than the big tech giants. Other concerns that are out there. Congress went on recess for the rest of August. They won't be back until September, and they have not passed any type of stimulus deal. The Republicans and the Democrats remain pretty far apart on that. The president put into place a series of what I would call emergency stopgap measures to try and maintain some amount of stimulus going into the economy. There's a little bit of concern from economists as to whether or not those measures will be sufficient to maintain the amount of stimulus that we've been seeing previously. And so we'll have to see how that plays out over the coming weeks. On the virus front, the data is generally positive. We've seen declining caseloads, declining hospitalizations, and declining deaths over the past couple of days across the United States. That's not just true. There certainly are some hotspots out there, but if you look at it on a national level, the data has been positive. China released some economic growth data this morning that shows that they're still on track. They're still growing, maybe slightly slower than had been anticipated, but still seeing expansion after the initial virus shutdown. And we got some inflation data out this week that was actually what I'll call Goldilocks. With inflation, you don't want too low inflation because that raises fear of deflation, which is very difficult to break out of. But we didn't see that. In fact, we saw a relatively robust CPI number, but not so high that the Fed has to worry about putting the brakes on the economy. So kind of just right for the Fed to not be worried about deflation, but not high enough for them to have to worry about taking their foot off the gas as they continue to stimulate the economy. So with that, I hope you guys have a great weekend. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to either myself or to your advisor. If you like content like this, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks so much.